Here for a edition of Mental Health Monday that's on a Thursday. So part of this is planned because we want you to be able to adjust your calendars and work with us through this. Just kidding. Actually, Monday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and hope that you had a moment to reflect on his life. Kristen, I'm sure you can relate. I've thought about him a lot over the past year as we've had conversations on this show and in conversations in our community, conversations that he was a part of, many decades ago. So hopefully folks were able to enjoy some time on Monday thinking through his legacy and how we continue to be better people here in the city of Noblesville. I'm joined once again this morning on this beautiful Thursday morning, by the way. The sun is shining with my friend Kristen Boice, who owns Pathways to Healing here in Noblesville. Kristen, as always, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Jenson. It's good to see you this morning.
Great to see you too. Thanks for adjusting your calendar this week. This isn't a pre-recorded show, so this is actually Thursday. So appreciate all of you adjusting your calendars and joining with us this morning. We have a lot of ground to cover this morning, Kristen. We've had a lot that has happened in the world, and talk about them, work to process them, which Kristen and I were just talking about offline a little bit. That's our goal here today, to process a lot of this stuff that's going on. But before we even can process, a few ground rules for you. If you have any questions at any point in time, comments, want to say hi, share some feedback, please type that in the chat box. We're happy to answer questions as we go today. We're happy to follow up with you if we don't know the answer. So feel free to share your thoughts or say hi and let us know that you're watching. We know a lot of folks will watch this throughout the coming weeks. So if you have a question after the show is live, leave it on there. We'll check it and get back to you as well. And so let's get started the way that we know how to get started, Kristen, with some square breathing. Take it away.
Yes, this is how we start every episode. So if this is your first time joining us, welcome. Everybody's welcome here. That's the beautiful part about coming together. And we just hope that we can be of service and that this is helpful for you as you're navigating transitions and uncertainties and fear. So the first thing I teach clients is you're going to put your feet on the ground. You're going to press into your feet. We're going to inhale for 4 through our nose. We're going to hold for 4. The hold is very important for the nervous system. We're going to slowly release out our mouths for 8. So like you're cooling soup, or for kiddos, you're blowing a balloon up, or you're cooling a cookie, whatever works for your kiddo. So this is something I invite you to do every hour, 5 to 6 breaths. Yes, I mean it, 5 to 6 breaths. If you commit to this one, uncertainty in the transition. So let's do it together. We'll do 2 breaths. So press through your feet on the floor. Inhale through your nose. Hold. Release slowly out your mouth. Check in. Notice the difference in your body. Let's do it one more time. Pressing in through your feet. Inhale. We're kind of letting go on that exhale. We're letting go of what doesn't serve us. We're letting go of the tension and tightness in the body. We're letting go of trying to control outcomes. We're letting go of what people think about us. We're letting go of what doesn't serve us on those out breaths. So I invite you to kind of, what do you want to breathe in? Peace. What do you want to breathe out? Letting go of what people think of you, shame, anxiety, whatever that looks like. So that's something to try. Maybe even breathe in a word love, exhale a word stress, and try that and see how that feels in your body. So every day, 5 to 6 breaths every hour.
Yep. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go for it.
No, I was just going to say, I know I talk often that I do it in the car a lot. That's kind of my time. If you see me in the morning on State Road 32, traveling in from my home, usually I'm square breathing. So I'm not in labor, just square breathing on State Road 32. So so I like I said, I do it all the time in our house. It's been instrumental for me in 2020. So I would encourage you to do it. Something so simple, but if we're not breathing, we got a problem. So take time to do it. So thank you. It looks like we even have some new friends joining us here. It looks like somebody from Brazil. So I love that. I'm assuming it's the country of Brazil, not Brazil, Indiana. Regardless, welcome. And Tim and Teresa, all of our good friends, thanks for saying hi this morning. And we're excited to have maybe even some new folks join us on it. And Stephanie, hi. Maybe some new folks on a Thursday morning. So I like that. Let's talk a little bit. 2 weeks ago, I was glued to my TV. As I'm a political junkie anyways, I watch the news all the time, which probably Kristen would tell you is not the best thing to do. I know. There's my truth, right? There's my truth. I do. And so I watched as our Capitol in Washington, D.C. was torn apart and sieged upon. And it really was something out of a movie. And it was unbelievable to me. And I told my wife that day that I had such a roller coaster of emotions. Part of me was, as an elected official myself, was just done with it. I just wanted out. I wanted, nothing to do with this. To the end of the day, I was more charged up to speak, truth to power and to speak out for those good people that are working in our country. So my roller coaster of emotions was huge. I can only imagine so many others were huge. So I don't want to not acknowledge that today. Maybe, Kristen, you could talk a little bit about processing those emotions, processing the anxiety that we're seeing even at the top levels of government and leadership in our country.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're willing to talk about this as an elected official, because people are like, oh, I don't want to upset anybody. It's like walking on eggshells. And the truth of the matter is we all had feelings. Regardless, everybody had feelings, and it's important to acknowledge those feelings. I know many people had grief, disgust, anger, fear, sadness. You run the gamut of whatever, and there might have been other emotions there. And to acknowledge those is the number one most important piece of healing. Let's not pretend we didn't have emotions. Let's not stuff them down, numb them out, push them away. Let's process them. Let's talk about them. Let's acknowledge them. Let's nurture them. What we don't do is we get into shame, and we kind of shame ourselves when we have feelings, or we're afraid we're going to get stuck in our feelings. If we don't process them, we're not going to move through them. So that was a monumental event that is the manifestation, I'm going to say something big here, of trauma. So what I see in the world going on right now is it's a mental health issue. It's an emotional wellness issue. We're not processing fears. We're not processing fears. We're not processing uncertainties. We're not processing what's going on. And it's manifesting out of trying to act out of what we're feeling instead of process our feelings. It's trauma. It's unprocessed trauma. And if we don't get a handle on it, if we don't feel our feelings, we're going to act out our feelings. That's why I'm passionate about teaching children, processing their feelings. Children seeing those images is very scary. It's scary for adults. It's very scary for children. I recommend not having the news on for little kids because they can't process that. They can't make sense of that. That's when 9/11 happened and children were watching those images. They can't process what they're seeing. It's too much for their nervous systems. And it's almost too much for adults because we don't have control over that. We only can control, I hate that word, but we can only manage what we're feeling on the inside. And so we have to take ownership of our emotions. We have to own the traumas, the emotional pain that we have in our lives, process it, nurture it, have some self-compassion so we can break free of the cycle. We can break free and learn a new way to handle discomfort, to handle anger, to handle fear. We're all going to have those emotions. And how do we handle those? We've learned to numb them. We've learned to move away from them. We've learned to act out. We haven't learned how to self-regulate and self-soothe through those and talk about them with each other with compassion and empathy and say, I am scared to death right now. And the conversation people are having right now is they're over it. They're over the pandemic. They're over this whole divisiveness. They're over what's happening. They're tired of it. They're weary. We're all weary. And we have to acknowledge our weariness because it's there. We have emotions. We have grief. We have fears and we have sadness. So first of all, we've got to acknowledge and process them. So we have our PAP, process, acknowledge, then we can step into possibilities. And if we all decide we're going to take responsibility for our own thoughts, feelings, and behavior, different world.
Mhm.
That's really the bottom line.
Yeah, I was telling you before we went on that Julie Jenson last night, who is 31 weeks pregnant, teaching online kindergarten, much like so many people have all these external stresses, right? And we're all under so much stress, and kind of made this comment of, "I'm just over everything," and we're hearing more and more of that. And we know as human beings, we can't just be over everything. We have to process. We have to move forward. We're parents. We're spouses. We're employees. We have things we got to get done every single day, and we got to keep moving forward and processing. So I think that's very important, Kristen, and a very important topic to touch on. I want to back up. You talked a little bit about kids. A lot of parents tune in here. A lot of grandparents tune into this show. Can you touch a little bit on if our kids did witness maybe what happened a couple weeks ago, or scared about the coronavirus, or you name it? Can we talk a little bit about how we talk to kids in this moment, how we help them process what they maybe saw a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, because it's a real thing that's happening and it's being talked about in some schools. They're talking about whether there might be in middle school or maybe even high school, they're talking about what's going on in the world. And it's important at home that you're processing how you feel around it so you can be available to process how they feel around it, what that looks like. So in our family, it was, how are you feeling about, because some people watched what was going on at the Capitol. Teachers turned on what was happening. So there wasn't a lot of discernment in terms of what to watch and what not to watch. I get it. It's a historical event. Again, we don't have that prefrontal cortex to process everything. So the first thing I said is, how are you feeling about it? And we talked about that. I'm afraid. That was scary. It was scary seeing people climb in windows. I said, yeah, tell me what that brought up for you. Well, I'm scared. What are you scared of? So you're going to ask and you're going to hold the space without judging it or rescuing them. So what we want to do is, it's okay, we're safe. Those are all okay to say after we've talked about their feelings, after we've processed what they feel. So you're going to ask, what was that like for you? What was scary about that? What are you afraid of? What are you angry about? What came up for you? And talking about those are a lot of times behavior. When we get violent, when we get scared, we act out instead of process within. And a lot of people didn't learn how to process their feelings. This is what I told my kids. So there's a manifestation of that. They think this is the way to solve the problem. And if we don't learn how to connect to our emotions, process our emotions, self-regulate, which a lot of people didn't know, we didn't know how important that was growing up. We didn't have all the neuroscience data now that we have. And so they don't know what else to do. So they're doing maybe what they saw to do. They're trying to belong. They're trying to feel secure. They're trying to feel safe. And this is a way they've done it. And how do you feel about that? Well, I don't want to do that. Well, yes, because you're talking about your feelings. That's super important to process them. That helps that prefrontal cortex in the brain, that CEO of the brain, start to develop. We don't develop until the age, again, I'm going to repeat it 50 times, till 25. So it's important that you're holding the space, and then we can talk about you're safe. After we've processed, we can say you're safe. Take a deep breath, breathe with me if we need to kind of do some self-regulation. And as parents, you've got to be processing what you witnessed too, not with your kids. So if you haven't processed that, you're going to potentially project your own disgust, your own fear, your own issues of anxiety onto your kid, and they're going to carry it. I think of this, I know I'm going to give you a little, this is my water bottle, but what we do as parents or grandparents or anybody really, teachers, it doesn't matter. If we don't process our own emotions around things, we can tag other people, and then the kid carries that around. So if I'm really angry and I'm just lit on fire, which it's okay to be angry, that's a normal part of life. What am I doing with that? Then the kid says, yeah, and then they absorb that. They don't even know why they're angry, but they're angry because you're angry, and now we're all angry. We've tagged our children. We've tagged someone else with our own emotions because I haven't processed them. So it's really important that we're not tagging our kids with our own unfinished business, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And as a parent of young kids, I catch myself oftentimes hearing one of my kids say something, and I know exactly, it sounds like a mini version of me talking. So it's just, and that's good or bad. Growing up, my son used to got trouble at daycare for yelling, "Shut up, Debbie." Her name was Debbie, the daycare teacher. And we had no idea where he learned that until the next night I was yelling, "Shut up, Indy," to our dog. And then it all clicked. So there's but it's the same way with emotions, is what you're telling us, and our feelings. If we don't process that, it is going to carry on within the next generation. So that's incredibly helpful. So thank you for that, because I know there's a lot of hard conversations going around in every household. So I want to transition to transitions a little bit, because we are in a nationwide transition. We saw an inauguration yesterday, and regardless of your political views, it was just a fascinating thing to watch, the transfer of power in our country, and to see some great pageantry and how that all works. And so I want to talk a little bit about transitions, because it may not be the country transition. It may be something in your home that you're transitioning. You may be transitioning to a new job. You may be transitioning to a new you in 2021, because you have these great goals for yourself. Can you talk a little bit about, Kristen, how we can handle transitions in our lives, whether it be all the way up to our federal government and to our own personal lives, kind of some tips on how we move through those transitions?
Yeah, I love this conversation. And I just want to say everybody's welcome here. This is a space where it doesn't matter your political beliefs, you are welcome here. Everybody is welcome in this conversation. And I think that's what we need to start doing as a whole, as a community. And then it goes out from there. Everybody's welcome to the table here. So I just want to say, I'm so grateful you're here. So secondly, transitions, we all have them. And there are multiple transitions in a day, in a week, in a year, in a lifetime. And so here's the thing I want to say about transitions. Typically, you're going to have, obviously, could have some fear around that, some grief, some sadness, depending on the transition, because a lot of people don't like change. Let's be frank, okay? Because it creates uncertainty. It creates fear. We don't know what to expect. Even if we don't like what was there, we kind of got, okay, I kind of know what to expect. Not totally, but transitions typically mean I don't know what's coming. I don't know what the next step looks like. I don't know, maybe even how to show up. Like, for example, I want to talk about the transition from the pandemic. We went from going to our jobs, going to school, having a routine, to totally that being stopped, to not going to our jobs, to not having our routine, to not knowing what the next day holds. That's grief. We have to talk about the grief that this has brought forward. And so typically what we're going to see, then we have another transition where we're like, okay, we can go out with masks, limited, still distanced, and the kids are going to go maybe back to school part-time. We don't know if they're going to be able to stick with school. So we're kind of feeling anxious. It's like an underlining anxiety and underlining fear, and it's still lingering because we don't know, right? Then we have these new strands, and will the vaccine, all these questions, right? We have a lot of uncertainty. And the main thing with transitions is, one, you got to do your deep breathing, okay? Number one thing, because you're not going to be able to control outcomes. This is the thing, and my word for 2020 was embrace the as is. Okay, that was my word, written in my journal on January 1st. Well, who knew we would be in a pandemic, and I truly had to let go of trying to control. And transitions are all about a releasing of, a surrendering of, trying to control the outcome and attending to your emotions, regulating, breathing, nurturing yourself through it. Self-compassion is the antidote to shame, that feeling of I'm defective, not good enough, something's wrong with me, and transitions. Anytime we make a change, we want to kind of try to control outcomes, and we feel like we're doing something like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Everybody else seems to have it all together. Well, they look like they're all good on Instagram and Facebook, and I look like I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm a mess over here. I'm like, no, you're not a mess. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just having feelings of fear. You're having feelings of sadness. You're having a transition. That's normal to have those feelings. We never taught people that feelings are normal, that you're having a healthy response to something that's scary sometimes. We're inviting you into self-compassion, which a lot of us are terrible at. Our inner critic runs the show. not our nurturing self. And that looks like something talking to yourself. And I know this sounds cheesy, like, okay, honey, take a deep breath. I know this is scary for you. I know you can't control the outcome and you're afraid. We're going to get through it. I got you. This is kind of what it looks like to reparent ourselves, to be the parent maybe we didn't have, or maybe our parent just did the best they could and they weren't nurtured either. We want everybody to show up and acknowledge us, to understand us, to hear us, to validate us. They don't know how to do that because it wasn't done to them. So we're expecting someone else to do that for us. Well, they don't know how to do it either. So we have to do it for ourselves. Anytime there's a transition, you got to be compassionate to yourself. You're not enabling yourself. You're actually helping yourself move through it rather than resist, numb, push down, whatever those feelings are during that transition.
And if we're feeling anxious about transitions, but let's talk a little bit about if you have a child going through a transition, like you said, I know some school systems are just now going back to school. You have a spouse maybe that's changing jobs. You have, and I think even the transition coming up of hopefully more people are getting vaccinated and things are going to start changing back to a new normal, if you will. How do we help others in our space? How do we be a better support system for them going through transitions?
Great question, because everybody's going through a transition right now. Not one person isn't making a transition right now. And that's the beauty, because we just made a global transition. We just made a national transition. And so when we acknowledge and say, how are you feeling today? How are you feeling today? Care about other people. Care about other people. Even if you don't agree with them, that's okay. You're not going to agree with everybody. Even if, because we think, well, I don't agree with them, so I'm not going to talk to them. Okay, and you can have boundaries. That's okay. You know, what's okay and what's not okay are boundaries. Saying people that you care about, check in with them. How are you feeling? And a lot of people are feeling afraid. A lot of people are feeling hopeless. A lot of people are feeling powerless. They have hope with the vaccine, which is exciting. So they have a little dose of hope. They're waiting maybe to get the vaccine. Maybe they're waiting for a loved one to get it. Maybe a loved one doesn't want to get it. We have to release trying to control the outcome or somebody else. You're powerless over other people. You are not powerless over yourself. You can decide how you're going to show up for this other person. And my main thing is empathy, empathy, empathy. Stop trying to change people's minds. You're going to be weird. Talk about weary. That's going to lead you on a road to exhaustion. I know we all want to do it. I want to sprinkle it out like candy, like you're enough, you're worthy, you matter. But the shame tells them a different story. So the main thing is I just hold the space, open heart, open mind, hold the space to say, how are you feeling? Let the person share, and I'll say, yeah, this is a really hard time. It is so lonely. I know you're weary. You're over this whole thing. You want life to be different. I get it. It's so hard. Yes. And then they're going to keep talking because they're processing. Acknowledgement is, everybody craves acknowledgement. Everybody's thirsty for it. Everybody wants to be seen, understood, and heard. Nobody knows how to do it because it wasn't done to them. So I teach, take a deep breath. Here's the thing. If you have self-compassion for yourself, you can offer it to other people. It's the truth. If I am in a bad space, chances are I'm going to have a harder time offering it to somebody else because I'm in a dark place. Let's be the light for other people when they're in the darkness. Let's be the light for other people when they're in the darkness. We can only be the light if you're doing your work. You can only be the light if you're nurturing that little boy or little girl inside of you. Because we all have one. We all have a little person inside of us wanting to be loved, wanting to feel like we matter and we're important. That's how we show up for other people. That is the key to showing up for somebody else. Nurture that little boy, little girl inside you. Then you can be the light for someone else in the darkness, because we all will have dark. It's just, there's no way around it. We will all have dark times. And wouldn't it be great if we can illuminate, find your own light within, and then we can be the light for somebody else.
I love that. I also love that there's some great people on our comment section, by the way, too. Joni, I don't know you, but the fact that she's an acknowledgement craver and a transition phobe. So appreciate you just putting that out there. And then my sister-in-law from Ohio saying hi too. So I love that people are just willing to just share where they are. An acknowledgement craver. I think that's key. Aren't we all somewhat of an acknowledgement?
Yes. I love this. This is the truth bombs. You know?
Yes.
We all want it. because
Yeah.
we're wired. We're human beings. We crave it, and we feel better when we get it. When someone goes, "Oh, I get it," aren't we like, "Oh, that feels so good," because we feel seen?
Not your one. You're like, did I make sense? Did that? What happened there? I would say my love language is words of affirmation. So I'll tell people every once in a while, I'm like, hey, didn't I do a good job there? You know what I mean? Like, you're looking for that. That's human. Just know who you are, though, and that certainly helps others acknowledge you or react to you better. So I love that people know.
Jody's showing up with her authentic self and helping others. This is
Yep.
how it works. This is how it works. You show up, you've been vulnerable, Mayor Jenson. You're giving permission to other people to be vulnerable. Then you got the chat going. Jody's being vulnerable. And look,
Great.
we're coming together with connection. We're modeling. We just did it. This is what it looks like.
I said, I've been accused of being an oversharer at times, but just prepare yourself. I'm an open book. So I love it.
I don't know if you overshare. I think you do vulnerability. Oversharing is a different thing.
All right. Well, stop me if I get to that point. So, hey, I want to end on a topic, involving conflict a little bit. And we can kind of get to this in a couple of weeks, but I monitored social media yesterday, which was probably my first mistake, because there were a lot of opinions swirling around about a lot of things. And I found the mute button on Facebook. That's like a snooze button for 30 days. There's some snoozing going on in my life. But maybe talk a little bit how briefly, and we can pick this up in 2 weeks. But if you and good friends have some conflict on social media, or you're seeing kind of different views on things, some initial advice on how to teeter around that this time of year with everything that's going on in the world.
Yeah, because you're going to have it. You're not going to agree with everybody all the time. It's just not going to happen, period, point blank. You're going to eat people you love, people you're friends with, and you're going to have disagreements. The thing is acknowledging it's okay we don't agree. This is where we get hung up, because we want to change the other person's mind. We want the other person to see the light. We want the other person to come to our side. Guess what? You're not going to do it. I'm just going to make an announcement. So you take a deep breath and you say, I hear you. And you might even say, we're going to agree to disagree. I think snoozing, if that's going to work for you, getting off social media. I know a lot of people have a detox. Here we are on social media because it's easy to help people this way, but some people have taken a detox. That's great. Whatever you need to do for you to be able to stay regulated. So my little brain model, so if we flip our lid, okay, so this is the prefrontal cortex, this is the regulated brain. If we get to a point where someone else has a different opinion and we start, let's say they flip and you start flipping, now what happens? Nobody's regulated. So I can't control this person flipping. I can set a boundary and say it's not okay to talk to me that way. I can manage how I respond. So I'm going to take my deep breaths. This is true for parenting too. I'm going to take my deep breaths. I'm going to work on getting myself centered so that prefrontal cortex with adults, kids don't have it, remember, comes back online, and I can respond rather than react. I can respond and take responsibility for my response. So here's what I see people do. Oh my gosh. And then they fire off something on social and it's out there.
Instant regret.
And they're like, oh crap, or they do it to their partner. They get a text and they're like texting their partner back and forth. And I'm like, oh, no, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not, when you're flipped, breathe. When you're flipped, write it out. When you're flipped, go for a walk. When you're flipped, say a prayer, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe a combination of all those things, because do not pass go and project or put this or create this, because you're going to feel awful. The shame will come up, the guilt. You might not even have shame or guilt, but you're going to stay frozen in this. You feel stuck. Only way through it is recognize those feelings, process them, breathing. Okay, now you're back to center. Now you can respond in a very appropriate way. I feel sad when you talk to me like that.